I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this episode was recorded, the land of the Bundjalung Nation of the Arakwal people here in Byron Bay, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the Thriving Leaders podcast, where we dive into real conversations that help leaders grow, teams flourish and organisations thrive. I'm your host, Claire Gray, Leadership and Team Facilitator at Thriving Culture. I'm also the author of Thriving Leaders, Learn the Skills to Lead Confidently, and Thriving Teams, When Teams Unite, Align and Achieve. This podcast is filled with practical tools, tips, actions and insights that you can immediately apply so you can lead confidently. I interview thought leaders from across the globe. I hope you enjoy the podcast. So my guest today is Neal Schore, and he's got one of those job titles that makes it sound like it's a little bit made up. He's known as a coach's coach. And so the better part of 2 decades, Neal has been that person that CEOs, founders, and senior leaders call on when they can't figure out why they're working flat out and still drowning. So he built and ran Triton Digital and took it from a startup business with hundreds of employees across 7 countries and then sold it. So somewhere in amongst that, he became the go-to advisor for some genuinely heavy-hitting business leaders, purely through word of mouth. So no marketing, which kind of tells you something about how good this work actually is. So Neal's just written his first book, The 25th Hour, which comes out on the 11th of August. And his book is really about time management. We often look at as a logistics problem. We try and cut meetings, we try and trim the inbox. But Neal's belief is that the real thief of time isn't our calendar, it's actually the fear and defensiveness and how we actually manage our emotions. So today we're talking about this in a lot of detail about how we manage ourselves so you can actually get back more time. So welcome, Neal, to the Thriving Leaders podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Beautiful. So let's start with your story for people who might be new to your work. How do you describe what you do and why it matters?
It is not a straight line journey. So I started my career in a very traditional way, working for a larger firm in the radio industry, and then became an entrepreneur, launching my first private equity backed business in the out of home media space, and then pivoted back into audio, which really became a passion for me, and then launched Triton Digital, which was in partnership with Oaktree Capital, so a very large private equity firm. And we built a large business that had 2 components to it. One was the digital infrastructure business, which today powers about half the world. So it's a pretty meaningful business that is now owned by iHeartMedia. And the other part of it was called Westwood One, a very large broadcast network that we sold. So while I was building the business, almost by accident, I became an executive coach. It started because one of our attorneys asked me to help mentor a young professional, and I helped him build and sell a business. And then he started another business with his brother. It became very complicated, and I was mentoring and coaching him and his brother, their team. That led for him to introduce me to someone else. And then someone in YPO, a professional organization, heard about my coaching. And before you knew it, I had a side hustle while I was building Triton. And I realized that working with different people in different size companies, that the issues and the takeaways were pretty similar. And I started to develop these tools and exercises that were had high utility across the board. And I can't tell you the science behind it, but it just worked. So in 2018, when I sold Triton Digital, so we were pretty much done, and I became an employee for the first time in a long time, I wound up expanding my coaching practice a bit more. And then certainly when COVID hit in 2020, it really took off. A lot of struggling companies in a variety of different ways. Sold the company again in 2021, and that was a great time for me to become an advisor to the company and exit. And so for the last 5 years or so, it's been a real focus on the practice. Where this really got interesting and fun for me, not that I didn't have fun all the way, but where it really got interesting is one of my clients, who is a very notable big brand entertainment firm, the principal gave me a big push to write a book. And when I tell you, Claire, that there was no vision that I had in any way, shape, or form to write a book. In fact, you mentioned it earlier. My practice was 100% referral. I had no website at the time, no marketing whatsoever. It was purely like very busy based upon the referral network only. And it wasn't until a second client said to me in a perhaps more tactful way, you should write a book, that I started to explore it. And after meeting an agent and then a writing partner, the book got a lot of interest in the marketplace. And it was the type of thing where it was good news, bad news, a lot of interest. And then the bad news was I had to write a book. So I had no idea how exactly to do it. And the last 2 years or so have been an incredible journey. So I then decided that in addition to writing the book, I was going to launch my fourth company around the book. So the 25th Hour Group was born to support the 25th Hour. And today we're back in a very entrepreneurial way. There's 8 coaches that, in addition to the one-to-one individual work that I do and that our team does, I do corporate offsites and facilitate and moderate any type of leadership retreats and anything I can do to build bridges and bring people together. So it's been a really incredible journey, and I'm super excited for the book launch on August 11th.
Yeah, what a journey. And I guess I particularly love the book title, The 25th Hour. I feel like that was what piqued my attention too, because everyone wants more time. And hearing your story when you were managing Triton, but also had your side hustle, it's like, how do you find the time to do all these things? But I guess it's about maybe looking at time management a little bit differently. So, what's your perspective on why we kind of get time management a little bit wrong right now? Like, why do you think it's so focused on what we do more so than how we think and feel?
So I had to make all the mistakes that a lot of leaders make in order for me to actually realize it. So the toolbox was built foundationally on my experiences and then the opportunities I've had to work with clients over the years, over the last 20 some years or so. The core principle of it is that you manage you. So it's not really about extra time. Obviously, we can't manufacture extra time. It's about stop giving away time. And we spend an enormous amount of time and energy trying to manage things that we cannot control whatsoever. So whether it's our board of directors or our boss or vendors or clients, there's influences that we have, but we can't control them. And we really try to control things that we can't. So when we can redirect and control what we can control, that's you manage you. What winds up happening is that we get a lot more right. So today you had mentioned that a lot of people aren't doing things right. I agree. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's
Mm.
just we attend meetings that we really don't need to be present in because we're afraid of missing out or we're afraid of not being visible, or perhaps our boss or our board is going to criticize us for one reason or another. We wind up speaking in meetings, and sometimes it's speaking just to hear ourselves speak or to showcase. We wind up commiserating with others, which is a massive use of time, disguised as collaboration. So we think we're being collaborative, but we're actually not doing that. And the list goes on and on and on about these types of functions and things that we do in our ordinary course. I refer to it as ordinary. And what I teach people to do is be exceptional by not doing things the way everyone else is doing it.
Yeah. So, what would you say are some of the ordinary things that people tend to get caught up doing?
Okay. So the ordinary is rooted in fear.
Mhm.
So we're afraid of getting fired. That's the biggest one. We are afraid of missing out. We're afraid of not getting the promotion. We're afraid of someone else out achieving us. We're afraid of failing. We're
Mhm.
afraid of not making enough money. We are really riddled with fears. So
Mhm.
as a result of it, we act in the way that we've been taught to act, very much in an ordinary, rhythmic way. We show up to meetings. We're not happy about it, although we're there. We put semi smiles on our face. We kind of participate. We don't really do our best work. We get really stressed about time. And so we're doing a lot of things, many of them not exceptionally well. And you can get promoted and you can make a lot of money and you can do a ton of things in terms of success living in your ordinary, or you can become exceptional. And the way to become exceptional is to do things differently. So when everyone else is attending a 1 hour meeting that you're not actually going to be a participant in, you can decline the invite knowing that the probability of you getting fired or ridiculed as a result of not attending that meeting is very low, unless you're obviously a key participant. That would be the exception. And then you really start to recapture time. With that recapture of time, you start to model behavior for other people. And that's regardless of what level or title you have in an organization. Modeling behaviors can happen at any level of an organization. And then we start to be happier. And when we're happier, there is a positive contagious effect that happens in the exceptional, just like the negative contagious that happens when we are faking, collaborating, and actually commiserating. And that's what happens a lot to erode our 25th hour.
So I'm keen to pick up on what you said about fears, because I think we all hold different fears. Like, how can a leader or a person confront some of the fears that might be holding them back or limiting them?
So fears are the governor of all of us. We all have them, whether you are the senior leader of a major organization or whether you're just starting your career, and everyone in between. There's no one is immune from the fears. The way to really govern the fears or start to get in touch with them, and I talk a lot about this in the book, comes in line with one, recognizing what's happening. And so there's like a self-awareness element of bringing the fears to the front and center. And then the next is to just start applying the tools. Pause, figure out what's happening, identify what's the intent? Did that person mean to insult me? Or were they trying to clarify something? What was the intent of what was happening? And then one of the great ways to manage fears is just ask a lot of questions. So a great personal example of a story to share, which absolutely affected me. And it's a little embarrassing to tell because of what wound up happening, but here's the way it went. I was brand new promoted into a leadership position. I have a team of people, most of whom are at least 10 years older than me and completely more experienced than me. And I end one of our first team meetings together. And one of the teammates, her name is Rachel, comes up to me and says, "Neal, you're really powerful." And this is the embarrassing part, I then spent about 3 months trying to not be powerful. And I'm telling you, I went into all different types of actions and things that I was doing to just be one of the team. And I realized that all of my fears got activated. Power is such a nasty, negative word. The connotation of it is bad. And I wanted to be a good boss. So I had a fear of being a bad boss. I had a fear of not knowing what I was doing. So maybe was I maniacal? All of these questions that came into my head that activated my fear system. What wound up happening is after literally 3 months, I went back to her and I said, "Hey, you got to help me. This is eating me alive. Help me understand what you meant by calling me powerful." And she said, "Oh, this is very easy. You sit tall in your chair. Your presence is just really strong. You answer questions clearly. You're really patient with us. And to me, that's just really powerful." So here, she had been paying me a lovely compliment, really a beautiful compliment. And what wound up happening is I swirled on it, just let my mind take away my fear system, wound up being my governor. And this happens all the time, perhaps not for 3 months in a shot, but we always wind up needing clarification. And when you manage we can absolutely manage our fears.
It's such a great example of when we do receive feedback, asking curious questions so that we can really clarify what someone means. Because I think language, what someone means by one thing, another person can misinterpret or interpret very differently as well. And so I think the power of questions and being curious is really, really important. You mentioned something before that you talk about in the book about what's the intent with fear as well. So I just want to pick up on that. How, like, and probably links to asking questions and understanding what someone's intent in, but how can our biases misconstrue what someone's intent is? So we might be assuming, oh, what's their intent of why they're saying something? And like, when should we ask what someone's intent is, or ask those curious questions so we're not making assumptions? Because sometimes it could be taking the word powerful and thinking that you mean something different to what you mean. How can we like understand really what someone's intent is?
It's a great question, and it really is one of the most powerful tools that I teach. The goal isn't to necessarily learn how to ask that question to the other person, but the goal is really to use the tool and ask yourself the question about what the other person's intent is. And so it would look something like this. I have a client that has a younger employee who has some bias or some potential performance issues, specifically because this particular person winds up coming into my client's office and needing a lot of support and a lot of attention. And so the issue was that my client was like, oh man, this person is a low performer. They are not an independent thinker. They can't figure things out on their own. When in reality, the intent of that individual was FaceTime with their boss. So the second we solved for what's the intent, the questions got asked. Hey, his name was Jake. He said, hey, Jake, what do you think we should do? And then all of a sudden, Jake started to shine in opportunities and thinking and creativity. And what wound up happening is this perception of negativity of bad performance was just offset by someone that wanted FaceTime. So we managed the FaceTime completely different than performance issues. And the net of it, it was solved by what's the intent. There's all kinds of other things that happen as well. I have a client who has a private equity board member who is extremely, extremely frustrating, asks a lot of questions, is very distracting. The assumption was that this particular board member is just annoying. And in reality, this particular board member is having some performance issues in his own firm. And so his intent is to gather a lot of information to be oversharing with his bosses, the senior partners in the firm, and therefore needs a lot of that help. Well, it's completely different when the CEO of this particular company thinks his board member doesn't trust him versus the fact that he's trying to get a lot of information specifically because he's in trouble actually in his own career. So solving for the intent is critical. I'll tell you, it looks something like this. Just pause. So you're in a situation, we tend to want to answer questions or jump in before someone's even done talking. Just pause. Think for a second, what's happening? What is the intent? Ask a clarifying question. Figure out that whole sequence very fast. It usually takes 5 to 7 seconds when you get rehearsed in it. And the outcomes can save massive sums of time.
And I wonder, when we think about what's the intent, sometimes it's probably actually thinking about what's the fear the other person might hold. Because like thinking about the two examples you gave, and I often use the scarf model by David Rock, maybe the status threat, and someone wanting a bit more face time is they want to feel valued. So often to help with the status threat, you do ask coaching questions so that you can make people feel valued too. And then likewise, the second example, the threat might have been a certainty threat. And so it's about how do you give clear expectations and clear detail so they can be certain about what they're not certain about. So I can really see the link between what you talked about before with fears, but also really understanding what someone's intent is, because it might come from their own fears.
You're absolutely right. They positively link together. It's proven.
Yeah. Awesome. So I feel like a lot of leaders appear like they've got it all together on the outside, but it's sort of like the iceberg or the duck with all the little flippers going crazy underneath the water. So how can we actually observe in others that someone might be struggling in terms of how productive that they actually are?
Yeah. So great question. Oftentimes, when people are overcompensating or you notice that they become really defensive or you see the fatigue. Sometimes it's physical, and other times it's just comes through in the case of what I refer to as the achs, like, oh, I got to go to this meeting with this client, or oh, I have to meet with this employee, or oh, my boss needs me. Just that feeling that we get, all of that that creeps into the system winds up being great flags so that when we're observant, and again, just the self-awareness that becomes a really important part of professional development is a great way to monitor.
Mm, yeah. Because I'm hearing that a lot of what we pay attention to is driven by our emotions. And in your book, you talk about a lot of different tactics to be a bit more productive, to manage those emotions. Where's the best place for someone to start? What are some tangible things? You've shared the what's our intent and the pausing and the clarifying questions. What else should we be focusing on as leaders to be more productive?
So we have to be aware that I use the metaphor that we all have a devil and an angel that are
Mm.
truly in our head. So the devil's job is to activate the fear system and to be that part of us that thinks that everything bad is going to happen and winds up being a very loud presence, very loud voice. And then the angel, of course, is there to offset that, saying, the probability of something bad is really not happening, and let's remain focused, etc. So one of the key ways that I love to start teaching leaders about this is just to really get in touch with their devil and their angel. So just realize it's there. We learn about the devil very early. Again, it's all that what we talked about before, just activating the fear system, misinterpreting, not understanding the intent, assuming poor intentions, cutting people off, getting defensive, all of those type of behaviors. So just pausing and recognizing, generally speaking, I don't think people want to walk around insulting people, certainly not in a professional environment most of the time. And so it's not what it appears on the surface. And then I love to teach people to just do things different. So do things different comes in a variety of ways. It happens through some exercises. My favorite one is what I call the pant leg exercise. When you put your pants on, are you a lefty, righty, or righty, lefty?
Oh, I've never thought about it. I think I'm a lefty righty, even though I'm right handed.
Right. So I'm a lefty, righty, even though I'm a right-handed as well. And
Yeah.
the reality is, with the exception of one person, after working this through with hundreds, perhaps thousands of people over the years, no one pays attention to what leg they put their pants on first. You just wake up, you do your thing, and you put in your pants.
Yeah.
And the idea of actually paying attention and focusing in on some of our actions really brings that awareness and that attention to it. And it's kind of a fun exercise. So my challenge to you would be,
Yeah.
starting tomorrow, become a righty lefty. And
Yeah.
what'll happen is you'll go in and you'll go to start putting your pants on, but then you're going to be like, no, I have to do this differently.
Yeah.
And the way that I like to apply this in business is you can do it, whatever it is, the same way in the ordinary course that you've been doing it and many other people have been doing it, that action, for a long time, or you can shake it up and do things differently and break the
Mm.
sequence. And when you do, it builds a little levity. It changes the tone of it. And when we can lighten things up and we can be better listeners and solve for the intent, it's a game changer in terms of productivity.
Yeah. So, I'm definitely going to actually start
Yeah.
to mix it up, and I will try with my right leg first. What are some examples of doing things differently in the workplace? Like what does that look like?
Okay, so it looks like this. We have a 60-minute meeting and everyone comes into the room and you start talking about your weekend or your morning or your day. So you start using all kinds of time. There's those niceties. And in the ordinary, people believe, oh, we're just bonding or we're just having a moment. But you've eroded 5, 6, 7 minutes in those niceties. Oftentimes there's not an agenda that go along with the meeting. So it just kind of free flows. Someone asks a question that's off topic and the meeting then gets hijacked into some other type of topics. And then you have to remember and come back to the topic of the meeting. We wind up then ending the meeting typically right at 60 minutes. Oftentimes it's a very rushed ending. We rarely ask who's doing what, by whom, by when is when I call it. So there's ambiguity when everyone runs out of the room to get to their next meeting. So what we could do different is this. It starts with what I call the 10% meeting rule, which is every meeting has to end 10% early. So if you have a 60-minute meeting, it has to end at 54 minutes. And the way to do that is you walk in the room, you start the meeting on time, you focus on the agenda. And when you get through the agenda, if there is time at the end for those that want to participate or talk about their day or their weekend or whatever it might be that are the niceties, they get to do that. But we don't want to take up everyone's time in order to do that. With a 10% change, doing things different, 6 minutes is a lot of time. In 6 minutes, I can get a snack, I can use the restroom, I can skim my emails to see if there's anything really pressing. I can send a text to my wife to answer the question that she might have sent to me. And it just brings a bit of a different pace all along. So 10% meeting rule is one way to do things differently. The second way to do things differently is to recognize that the patterns that we've always done it isn't necessarily the most productive or modern patterns to do it now. One great example that I love to use there is the way that we run weekly one-on-ones. So oftentimes there's weekly one-on-ones. People come into the meeting. It's the same regurgitation. It winds up being very unproductive. The boss feels like they need to get something done. The person that's there feels like they have to impress their boss. Doing things different is focusing in on only the 2 or 3 new things that happened in that particular week. So, hey, instead of just giving me updates, let me ask you the 2 projects that I'm interested in the update on and tell me 3 new things that happened this week. Or if there was only 1, that's fine too. And we just start to bring a different tone or levity and just break those sequences and those patterns. The other thing, and this is a big one, is doing things different means being definitive. So that means all the kind of sort of maybes have to go away. So it looks like this. I was kind of thinking that the way that I want to handle this project is to go left. And it's not that what you proposed isn't good. And I really appreciate it. And I really respect your time. But I was sort of thinking that I'd like to probably go to the right. And I walk away from that conversation, and so do you, going, I'm not exactly sure what you said. I think we're doing this. And typically it requires more follow-up. Being definitive is, thank you for the feedback. Thank you for the input. What I've decided is, and just be extremely definitive, knowing that you can trust and build trust with team members, again, any layer or level. And for as simple as that sounds, being definitive is not a core principle of leaders and in the workplace right now.
Yeah, I would agree, because I do think people want to be inclusive and they want to maybe have a fear that they don't want to hurt other people's feelings. So they might tiptoe and not actually be direct or clear about what their feedback actually is. But that causes a lot of ambiguity and a lot of waste in teams and organizations.
Right. So if I were coaching you, I would say that statement more definitively. You said they might do it. You used the word might. So one thing that I teach people to eliminate is words like might or should or probably, because those are dilutive, non-definitive words. And when we can get comfortable being definitive, recognizing that we're not being bossy and that we're not being arrogant and that we're not intending to hurt anyone's feelings, but we are intending to actually be very clear in our communication, it winds up helping people a ton just in terms of the clarity. The other thing is that we have to recognize how we act is how our teams act. And so there's always that connection to, I want to be normal. I want to fit in. I want it to be like other people do it. It happens with clothing. I love this. I go into offices all the time. And when I'm there, you can just look around and most of the time people are just dressed in almost like a uniform. This happens primarily in like financial services firms, a little bit less so in some creative firms. There's one in particular I was visiting. I was doing a 3-day workshop for this firm, like an offsite, but we did it in their offices. And I noticed right away, everyone was wearing the same shoes. It was fascinating to me. And I was facing, it was a conference room, and people were trickling in and out in these sessions that we were doing. And so I was looking out and I noticed people are just wearing the same shoes. I've never seen this before. And then in the third session, the CEO walks in and the CEO is wearing the shoes. Aha, of course. Everyone just wants to wear the same shoes as the CEO. So I went out, I bought 4 pairs of these shoes, all different colors. They became my absolute favorite shoes, incredibly comfortable. And especially if you're in an office and walking around, just incredibly comfortable shoes. And I realized that we want to be normal, we want to connect to. And so that's one thing you could do different. What would happen is if someone just wore a different type of shoe to the office, they would be the outlier. But yet that creativity and the opportunity to do things different, for as simple as this sounds, is really important to do.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I just saw a video that was on LinkedIn yesterday, which talks this exact point around how we want to belong and be part of the tribe and how we get so influenced. And I think it was this example where they had 3 actors that were standing up, and then they had real candidates come in for job interviews. And every so often that a bell would ring and the actors would sit down. And so they're filling out a form and then they'd sit down. So then the people that are actually the candidate, then they sit down and then the bell rings and then they stand up and everyone stands up. And then what happens is after a while, a candidate comes in and doesn't actually follow. And then after a while, the organization comes in and they say, oh, can you come with me? And they actually remove the person that was different. And then what happened was then eventually there's this whole group of people now, and they're standing up and sitting down to this bell. And then they actually remove the actors. And then it's just the people that have learnt the way to be. And it's so interesting how we get influenced, because even in your example, you went out and bought 4 pairs of these really comfortable shoes. So sometimes it can feel hard to be the outlier, but I guess that's like, it's almost ingrained in us from school to fit in and be like everyone else. But then the people that actually often succeed, or the entrepreneurs, are the ones that really stood out and did things differently. And so how do we keep that creative, unique muscle in us to do things slightly differently?
It's great. And I love how you pointed out that it's taught in school, because I speak about this both in the book and publicly all the time. I refer to it as our robots. And I don't mean the robot in a negative way. I feel like it's almost like our programming or our default settings are starting to be set right from the very earliest ages, right from early grade school. And what winds up happening is we eat lunch at 11:37 a.m. We wind up going then to the play yard and having recess for 22 minutes. We then wind up lining up and coming back in, and the rhythms that start to build at very, very young ages for us. Then you go to middle school and high school and college. And then when you get into the workforce, those rhythms are pretty solid. And if you look at most companies, the way that promotions and acknowledgement and affirmation is handled is very rhythmic. So if you serve 2 years and you do an okay job, then you can promote it to the next level. That comes with a 5% pay raise. And you know the sequence, just like going from first grade to second grade or middle school to high school. And the idea here to be exceptional is to break those sequences. And it happens in very difficult ways. So whether you're changing your pant leg or whether you're doing other simple things, like this might be one of my absolute favorites. I have a client who walked every evening just as a way of just getting some steps in and some movement after being static most days. And his pattern was to go out his door to the left, walk the exact same path. He knew exactly how many miles he was going to walk and how many calories he was going to burn. So it became very robotic, very rhythmic. So my challenge to him was walk out your door to the right and find a different walking path. Just change the sequence. And it took me weeks to convince him to do it even once. So he did it. And what wound up happening is around the 3rd time that he went to the right, he met a neighbor that he had not ever met before. He lived in his home 10 or 11 years, I don't recall the exact number. And he met a neighbor that hadn't seen because just didn't go that path. They got to talking in a very high, friendly way. And today that neighbor is his largest client. And it was how did you know to do things different? Well, had you not been willing to ever go to the right, and it took me weeks to get you there, this wouldn't be your largest client. And for as, again, simple as these things sound, we have to break the sequences and good things do happen. Our robots can be programmed differently.
It's interesting hearing you say that. I think about, like, I worked in a large bank for 10 years and had a corporate background. And then I've worked for myself now for the last 8 or so years. But even it took me years to break the 9 to 5 cycle. Like, you're so used to having to kind of sit at your desk and get the work done, and for that to feel comfortable. And then I think about when I facilitate, say, a 2-day leadership development program, and when people come in, they sit in exactly the same seat that they sat in the day before, and trying to get them to sit in a different seat. It's like that comfort of where they know. And even if you're a leader in a meeting, like, does everyone sit in the same seat every time you have your team meeting, or do people mix it up? And even just sitting in a different chair to cause a little bit of disruption, although it's minor. And I think about around our dinner table, like, we sort of have set seats where we sit, and occasionally we mix it up and it feels a little bit uncomfortable. So how do you create these little circuit breakers to do things a little bit differently?
So I love getting people comfortable being uncomfortable. It's one of the core
Yeah.
premises of the toolbox. I facilitated an offsite, a corporate retreat last week. The way that I always set up the tables, or have the company set up the tables, is we always do assigned seating, and to make sure that the people that are at the same table in the workshop or offsite are not team members and people that work together every day. So
Mm.
just prior to us kicking off that morning, I observed two people that took their name placards and moved it to another table and like did a flop as if no one was looking. And so I
Cheeky.
started the meeting. I'm all about get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I tell people that there's going to be some of these uncomfortable moments. So I had the two people that I observed doing the swap stand up and explain why they chose the seat. And you could see, like, in one case, the person became beet red, and another case, the color drained from their face.
Yeah.
And it took some courage in order for them to say, well, I wanted to sit with my colleague. It was like comfortable for me. And in the other case, the person said, well, I didn't know the person sitting next to me. And so I just didn't think that would be as fun. And so I had them switch back to their original position. And the whole point was to get to know people that you don't work with every day, and to break those sequences. But happens all the time. If you walk into a party, what's the first thing you do? You gravitate directly to the people that you know there. You find your
Mm.
incubation, your comfort. I refer to it as the blankie, right? We wrap ourselves in the blankie. We get really comfortable. And then sometimes we step out of that, as opposed to you walk into a party, everyone's there why don't you go introduce yourself to someone new? Try things different.
Mm.
You have no idea who you're going to meet.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I was literally having this discussion about going to it was like a Mother's Day breakfast, and you do that. Like, you get there and you're a bit awkward, and you're like, oh, is there another mum here that I know? And then you find your people that you know. But then at work, we expect people to be networking with people that they don't know. What are ways that leaders can create that holding environment for people to get comfortable with discomfort? Like, what are some other things that you've seen leaders do well?
So when a leader starts getting comfortable with the tools, and they can they can pause, figure out the intent really quick, not be in their ordinary, which is the way everyone does it, but really move into their exceptional, which is around doing things differently and breaking these sequences like we're talking about.
Mm.
One of the key things is just lighten it up. So
Mm.
we wind up in stressful situations in our work, our work environment every day. It's deadlines, it's board members, it's team members. So just recognize that if we can just lighten it up, and I'm not talking about become a comedian. This is not about having jokes. This is about like, okay, well, let me do things differently here. And if it doesn't work out, I'll fix it. And there's just a tone difference to what I just said versus, oh no, if I don't do it and I'm not on time, I'm going to get in trouble and it could affect my performance review and therefore my bonus. And so just try doing things differently and shaking it up and breaking those very embedded sequences and watch how your leadership gets a lot of attention by just having that tone change and that lighter, less fearful way of doing things.
We all have these automatic reactions in the moment to things. And it sounds like a lot of what you're teaching leaders is to manage themselves in those moments and ensure they don't have an emotional reaction or aren't clear that ends up, I guess, chewing up time. What do you recommend for leaders to do to really manage themselves in those moments?
So we are naturally, again, programmed into our defensive and into our ordinary. So as I
Mm.
mentioned before, the key is just pause, just create a little bit of space. Don't assume negativity, solve for the intent, ask a clarifying question, buy yourself a minute or two, and then do things differently. So for the one key thing to do that, and this is the headline, is you manage you. Stop trying to control things that you cannot control. Just before our meeting here today, I got a call from a client she is the leader of a private equity backed business, and they are working on an acquisition that is transformational and it is moving very slow. And now the private equity firm is threatening to not close the deal because the business is having a couple soft months of performance. And her fear system just took over. Her devil came right into play. And she got very active about how everything bad was going to happen. Very much in the ordinary, very much in the traditional ways that we think about it. So we just went through a quick exercise. Okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? The absolute catastrophe of what could happen. And in 5 minutes of a phone call, which is a very limited amount of time after I had asked her how long she had been swirling on this is like the overthinking it, just everything bad's going to happen. We were about at the 4 hour mark. And so in 5 minutes, we figured out that the worst thing that can happen is the acquisition doesn't close, that the company continues to limp along in performance, and then her board will fire her. And that's the worst case scenario catastrophe. And then when we probability weight that, we realize that, or she realized that the probability of that happening was somewhere around 2%. So extremely, extremely unlikely. So my question to her was this: okay, I'm going to give you an investment opportunity where one case you have a 98% probability of success, the other case you have a 2% probability of success. Where are you going to spend your time? And she was like, oh, that's easy, Neal. Why would I ever spend a minute on a 2% probability of success? It makes no sense. Of which then I get to respond, well, why are you spending the last 4 hours on the 2% probability of you getting fired? And
Mm.
just that lighter tone and the reality around it, which took, again, less than 5 minutes, democratizes this devil that becomes our governor, brings light to it and a lighter nature to it. And she was like, oh, wow. Okay. I get it. I'm back on track. And she sent me a text just before we started, like, yeah, I get it. I owe myself 4 hours of swirling. That's what I call debits and credits. The normalcy around it, it happens to me. I teach this and it happens to me as well. We're not ever going to remove the swirl. It's going to happen. The idea is just to limit it and then recognize that happened and not ever get angry or upset with ourselves.
Mm. I like the kind of stepping above it to be able to kind of analyze how we went without judging it. One of the strategies that I found really interesting in your book was it's my fault. So as a leader, looking at everything as it's my fault. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why that works?
Okay. So I learned about it's my fault, or I taught myself it's my fault in, again, a non-traditional way. So as CEO of my company, I follow the adage of course I'm responsible. And that's very ordinary. Every CEO you'll ever meet will be like, well, ultimately I'm the decision maker and the buck stops with me. And there's those type of adages, but we don't actually believe it because we can't be doing everything. So the way this works is I run people through an exercise where everything is their fault, but it's the ridiculous type of fault. So it would look like this. Your neighbor's garbage can fell over. That's your fault. There's traffic, your fault. The light bulb in the office burned out. It's your fault. We're having technology issues today. It has to be my fault that there's technology issues. And when we can bring a lighter tone to the word fault, which is a pretty negative word, right? Like, it's your fault. We want to, I wasn't there that day. And this came to light for me in grade school. So an aide on the playground wound up asking me to pick up a candy wrapper. And my first response was, that's not mine. Why would I pick it up? And she said, oh, no, I know that. But my hands are full and I was just asking if you don't mind helping me. So it was really well intended. She just needed a little bit of help. I just happened to be standing there. And my initial, again, default setting was defensive. It's not mine. So I started thinking about some of these experiences that we have as kids, again, the programming of our robots, and it goes directly into the workforce and we get defensive almost immediately. So if we learn that it's our fault, my boss is having a bad day, it's my fault, it just tone changes it so we can focus on the facts and reduce all of that emotional gunk. And it really changes the way that we deal with things. I love to tell people, I went to a meeting last week. I live in Los Angeles. Los Angeles traffic is everything that you read about, hear about, and perhaps have experienced before. And I chose to leave my house in rush hour, right around 8:30 a.m. to get to a 9:30 a.m. meeting on the west side of Los Angeles. And I was just furious the entire ride. And I was absolutely weaving in and out of cars and looking for other routes to take and very distracted. So then when I walked into my 9:30 meeting, I was not really myself. I was not in my ready state. And that could have been traffic's fault, or I could look at it like this, like, I pretty much know there's going to be traffic. Had I left my house at 7 a.m., gone to the gym on the other side of town, showered, and then gotten a quick bite to eat and showed up at the meeting, then that was 100% in my control. The traffic is 100% not in my control. So I was spending all this time and energy and focus trying to control traffic, which I can't, as opposed to managing myself, which I can. So therefore, it's 100% my fault. And not in the literal, like the traffic, but the actions and my behavior around it. And if you apply that to being a leader, it's applicable all the time. As the leader, you can choose the start time to a meeting. You can choose the agenda to the meeting. You can request information in advance of the meeting. We have a lot of options. So instead of being disappointed in the team member that didn't perform, looking at it, that must be my fault. I didn't explain that well. And then you go back in and you explain it differently in a very definitive way. Most often the results are different. So in the kind of sort of maybes or there's probabilities, totally my fault if I use that language and I'm not clear, totally my fault. And we can continue to build on this because all things do lead back to different ways of doing things, likely make it your fault.
I love it because I think that then it comes back to the choices that we make, and rather than being defensive or getting caught up in the things we can't control, how can we focus on the things that we can control? Yeah.
It's a game changer. Yeah.
Awesome. So Neal, if you could leave our listeners with one message about thriving teams, what would that be?
So the one core principle, the one message, and it is hard, so it's not easy to do, is you manage you. Stop trying to manage everyone else. Stop trying to control all the things that you can't control. Just focus on you managing you.
I think that's awesome advice. Thank you so much, Neal. I've learned a lot, and particularly like a couple of the practical tools about like what's the intent and understanding the fear and the clarifying questions and the pause. And I'm going to have a little play with putting my right leg into the pants as well, and I'll let you know how I go.
You got to let me know. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
What a great conversation with Neal. What I loved about this conversation was how practical it was. We didn't just talk about time management in the abstract, we got into the actual mechanics of it. What's the intent? Pausing before you react. Stopping swirling on the 2% probability and putting your energy into that 98%. And my personal favourite was the pant leg challenge. If you're anything like me, you'll be catching yourself tomorrow mid putting on your pants, wondering why you're suddenly overthinking which leg goes in first. But it's really about doing things differently and breaking some of the habits that drive the way we behave. So my key takeaway from my conversation with Neal is how I'm going to manage myself. And for you, how are you going to manage you? It sounds so simple, almost a little bit too simple. But so much of our exhaustion comes from trying to control the things we are never going to control in the first place, whether that's our boss's mood, the traffic, what the board thinks of us. Neal's point is that the moment we stop pouring energy into that and start managing our own fear, our own defensiveness, and our own default settings, we get time back. So what you'll start noticing is you'll stop wasting your time and start getting more focused and more productive, which will actually give you time back. If this got you thinking about how you might be operating on autopilot without even questioning how you're operating, I'd love to hear what you're going to break first. Neal's book, The 25th Hour, is out on the 11th of August, 2026, and it's full of these tools if you want to go a bit deeper. You'll find the details in the show notes along with where to find Neal and his work at the 25th Hour Group. Thanks for listening to the Thriving Leaders podcast. If this episode was useful, share it with someone who could also get value from it. And please do subscribe so our podcast lands in your inbox each fortnight. Thanks for joining us at the Thriving Leaders podcast. If you'd like to find out more about our leadership programs, facilitation, keynote speaking, or executive or team coaching, head to our website, www.thrivingculture.com.au. This is also where you can sign up for our newsletter, where I share useful tips on leadership and team development, as well as our podcast. You can also grab a copy of either of my books on our website, and it's also available on all good online retailers, including Audible, Spotify, and Kindle. If you like this episode, I'd be so grateful if you left a 5-star review, as it helps us reach more people and therefore helps more leaders thrive. Please subscribe.